This tutorial is for Clue 2 of the Purport pattern by Janica Carter, which is the 2025 year-long mystery knit-along pattern from Expression Fiber Arts. The pictures here, this is not blocked. I've pinned it out. I haven't actually wet it. I just wanted to, give you a good sense of what this stitch pattern actually looks like and how it fits in with the previous clue. This is a pretty straightforward clue. I'm not going to be working the knit rounds on camera just because they're long, and I did want to be able to show you things at the beginning and end of each of the actual patterned round, which are rounds 2 and 4. I am going to, however, start with a suggestion for a way to work Clue 2 if you're switching yarn colors. Just a suggestion for you. As usual, there are timestamps in the video description, and you can jump ahead to whatever part you want to see. There are not a lot of timestamps for this video just because it's pretty straightforward, so let's jump into it here. So in round 2, we're making, it's kind of a mesh, or it might look like little flowers with a little, this little collar around the bottom of the set. But it's basically made with a yarn over a slip stitch. You knit 2 stitches and then you move that slip stitch over the 2 stitches that you knit and off the needle, and so it makes this little I want to say a collar, makes a little ring around the 2 stitches that you knit, and then your yarn overs make these nice little holes, and so you end up with this mesh that is created from working that over and over again. And if you follow the instructions to move your beginning of round at the end of each round 4, you get this nice diagonal where the mesh is kind of stacking to one side or the other. So first I'd like to start with a suggestion. So if you're working in the same color, don't even bother to do this. Just work round 1, which is just knit, and then jump ahead to round 2. If you are switching to a second color to work your Clue 2, I would recommend that before you actually begin your round 1, which is just knit, back out. So just tink back 5 or 6 stitches from your right needle with your color A. Just unknit those, put them back on your left needle. Just 5 or 6 stitches, however many you want to do this with. If you are adding a color in, I just recommend doing this because it's going to help secure it in a way that doesn't make this gap where the yarn overs where you're actually adding your yarn. So you are adding your yarn there to actually start knitting with it. It's just going to secure it a little bit. So to work this, you're still going to be knitting with your color A. So you're going to go, you put your needle into the stitch as if to knit, and then just drape your new color over the needle. So with your tail away from you and the color that you're working with coming towards you, just drape that over your needle and then make your stitch and then pull it back off the needle. All right, so you're basically catching it here behind your working yarn, and then knit a stitch and then do that again. Insert your needle into the stitch. So you're draping from top to bottom, wrapping it from top to bottom, and then wrap your stitch as usual and then bring that off. Knit another stitch and then do that again. Insert your needle into the stitch, drape it over the needle, wrap my yarn, bring it back off, make the stitch, knit another stitch, drape it over the needle, wrap my yarn, bring it back off, make the stitch. So what that's doing is it's actually catching my yarn back here. All right, and so as I'm making my first few stitches with this yarn, it's going to hold it in place so that I don't end up with a big gap here. So to just kind of give you an idea of why I'm recommending that, if you just switch to your new color and let your old color, you just picking up your new color to start the round and let your old color hang, you're going to end up with this nice little hole at the end because of those yarn overs right there. It's going to seem a lot bigger than it is, and it will be. It's something you can eventually cinch down and fix once you're, weaving in your tails and everything. It's just, it can be a little disconcerting as you're making this new round to try to figure out the tension on that, especially if you're trying to open it up and you see this big gaping hole there. So I just want you to have an option to avoid that is all. So then to begin round 1 of Clue 2, you're going to switch to your new yarn color and just knit. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side here with 5 or 6 stitches where I'm just going to be catching my old color the same way to hold it so that it's basically holding it securely without leaving. It's just going to keep it from leaving a big gap. So it's just a suggestion. You don't have to do it. You can just pick up your yarn and knit as usual. All right, so to actually start clue 2, I am going to just work this first stitch with my new color. And then I'm going to just catch my old color 3 times as I work along here. So I'm going to go into this next stitch as if to knit. I'm going to bring my new color up and over, so it's coming from underneath my actual working yarn. Wrap that old color over, wrap the new color under, take that old color off, make the new stitch, and then work the next stitch normally, then do this again. Wrap that old color over, wrap the new color under, take that old color off, make the new stitch. And just do this one more time. Over, under, off. And what that's going to do is it's just going to secure this where I've changed to the new yarn color with both the new color yarn over here to the right and then the old color yarn to the left. It's just going to make that join a little bit more secure so it's not gapping open the whole time I'm trying to make this. And then if you want to see the pattern, you're not having to deal with this gap in there. And that's halfway done to weaving both of those tails in. So for the rest of round 1 of clue 2, you're just going to knit the round. So I'm not going to make you watch me knit this entire thing around. So feel free to join me. I'm just going to jump ahead to the beginning of round 2. So round 1, of course, is just you're knitting all the way around. You don't really need to watch me do that. So we're going to start with round 2, which is actually a pattern round. So round 2 and round 4, you are working the same pattern stitch. The only difference between round 2 and round 4 is round 4 starts the pattern stitch 2 stitches in. So you just knit the first 2 stitches and then you begin the pattern stitch the same exact way as you would start round 2. And then there's just a little bit of a change when you get to the end of round 4, and that's because the pattern stitch we're working at the end, we actually need to use one of these stitches, technically both of these stitches that we knit at the beginning, but we're going to be both working with those to complete the pattern stitch and using those to shift the beginning of the round. So I'm going to work the pattern stitch a few times here for round 2, just to demonstrate how to work the pattern stitch. It's very simple and easy to learn. To work this pattern stitch, you're going to start with a yarn over, and then you're going to slip the next stitch knitwise. That is, you're going to go into the stitch as if to knit with your right needle, and then slip it over to the right needle without working it. Then knit the next 2 stitches. So your yarn over is going to kind of cross over the stitch that you slipped. Don't worry about that. Once you've knit those 2 stitches, though, I would recommend tensioning your yarn here in the back so that you don't end up slipping either one of these stitches that you just knit off. Bring your left needle purlwise into that stitch that you slipped, and then bring it over those 2 knit stitches and off the needle. And that's it. That's the entire pattern stitch. Yarn over, slip knitwise, knit 2, 1, 2, and then bring that stitch you slipped knitwise over those 2 knit stitches and off the needle. Yarn over, slip, knit, knit, and then pass the slip stitch over those 2 knit stitches. Yarn over, slip knitwise, knit, knit, pass the slip stitch over. Yarn over, slip knitwise, knit, knit, pass the slip stitch over. And you're just going to repeat that all the way around. Yarn over, slip knitwise, knit, knit, pass that slip stitch over. And if you have your stitch markers on there, I would recommend leaving them on until you complete the round, because you can go back and basically look and see. So you should have yarn over and then these 2 stitches with the little collar on them. You should have 6 of those. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 between all of your stitch markers. It's a really good way to see very quickly if you forgot to slip the stitch over, like past the slip stitch over, which is the most common thing that's going to mess up on this round. So as long as you're doing your yarn over, and then after you do the slip, knit, knit, you're remembering to do the pass. So the pass tends to be the thing that gets missed. The other thing that can get missed is dropping this yarn over. So if you, in the midst of getting the slip stitch, you end up with your yarn back on the back of the work instead of in the front, you might not get that yarn over on there. So yarn over, slip, knit, knit, pass. Yarn over, slip, knit, knit, pass. So just keep doing that all the way around. When you get to the end of round 2, you should end with that final pass the slip stitch over should be the last thing you do, and you shouldn't have any more stitches after you do the yarn over, slip, knit, knit. That last knit stitch should be the last stitch of the round, and then passing the slip stitch over should be how you finish that round. And then round 3, you're just going to knit all the way around. So I'm going to show you one way that you can account to make sure that you've got your stitches all worked correctly, that you've worked the correct stitch pattern all the way across round 2 when I get to the end of round 2. So I will join you there. So when you get to the end of a pattern round, you can quickly glance around and just make sure you have these sets where it may look actually like the yarn over follows the little collar, but it's actually at the beginning. Your yarn over is going to lean slightly differently than the rest of your stitches. To follow with me here, you've got your 2 stitches with the little collar around them, and then your yarn over is just kind of leaning slightly more. So obviously if you push these stitches together, it's not going to be quite as obvious, but you should still be able to find each set having a single stitch that's coming into the knitting, and then 2 stitches with the little wrap around the bottom. And so you can just kind of glance around at your entire round and just make sure that each of those stitches that you've got the yarn over followed by the 2 stitches with the collar, you can do that pretty quickly without actually having to count. So if you started with the right number of stitches, you should end with the right number of stitches. So as I come over here around to my end, I did this on purpose, but you can see I've got a set here that doesn't have a collar on it. And don't feel like you have to go back and fix that if you did not do the stitch that was supposed to be lifted over. Just grab a locking stitch marker and put it on your needle or your cable right after the yarn over. Okay, so you're going to kind of have to pull that yarn over out of the way a little bit. But just put it on right after the yarn over. And then as you work your knit round, when you get to that, I'll show you what to do. But when you get to that, you can fix it rather than having to tank back and undo all these yarn overs that you pulled over, that you passed over. Instead of having to do that, you can just fix it when you get to it. So just put a little stitch marker wherever you accidentally forgot to pass that slip stitch over, and you can fix it when you get to it as you're knitting the next round. So for round 3, I'm just going to knit around. I'm not going to make you watch me knit all the way around. Over here where I forgot to pass my slip stitch over the stitches right here. So you can see my stitches here don't have the collar. I've got my yarn over here on the right side of my stitch marker, my slip stitch that I forgot to pass over, and then my 2 knit stitches, and then the next yarn over. So when I get here, I am going to, that's where we're going to start next, is showing you how to fix that. And then I'll do the end of round 4 for you. Okay, so I'm coming up here on the stitch where I forgot to pass my slip stitch over. So I'm knitting that yarn over before my stitch marker, and I'm going to take my stitch marker off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide all 3 of these stitches, my slip stitch and the 2 knit stitches after that, over to my right needle, and then use my left needle to bring that slip stitch over, and then pass those 2 knit stitches back to my left needle. And I can just keep knitting as I was, So I didn't have to rip anything out. I didn't have to go back around to fix this. All I had to do was get to it, and then I can just do that pass the slip stitch over before I actually knit those stitches. So if you forget to do a pass the slip stitch over, don't feel like you have to rip back. Don't feel like you have to start over again. Just mark right after the yarn over, and then when you get to it in the knit round, just do the pass before you knit the stitches. And that will save you a lot of time and effort. So I did take out my stitch markers on this round. I'm just going to finish up round 3 here, and even though you've already knit it, your yarn over from the previous round is likely to want to cross your beginning of round marker. By the way, if you are doing magic loop and you're thinking, I don't have a way to hold a beginning of round marker on there because every other needle switch I would lose a marker. Please go down to the video description and look at my video for how to do traveling loop, because you can put a stitch marker on, you can knit just like I'm doing all the way around, and all you're having to do is change where your excess cord is. So your excess cable, if you're just having to move it a little bit throughout the round, then you can always knit like this. You're never having to knit from the cable, which is going to make your stitches more even. So if you are still doing magic loop and like knitting from stitches on the cable halfway through the round, you can stop doing that. Just go look up my video on traveling loop and use that to add a beginning of round marker. Okay, so to begin round 4, you start with 2 knit stitches. So knit the first 2 stitches, and then you're just going to do the same stitch pattern that you were doing in round 2. Yarn over, slip 1 knitwise, knit the next 2 stitches, pass the slip stitch over. Yarn over, slip 1 knitwise, knit 2 stitches, pass the slip stitch over. You're just going to do this all the way around the round. When you get to the end of round 4, you're going to be doing this. You're going to do the yarn over, slip the next stitch knitwise, knit 2 stitches, pass the slip stitch over. When you do that, you should have at the end of round 4 1 stitch remaining. So that's where I'm going to meet you. I'm going to meet you 1 set of the stitch pattern before the last stitch of round 4. Okay, so coming up here to the end of round 4, I have 1 more full set of the pattern to go through. So yarn over, slip, knit, knit, pass that slip stitch over, and then I do have 1 stitch remaining before my stitch marker. So to finish out round 4, you're going to do a yarn over and go ahead and slip that last stitch knitwise. Take your stitch marker, your beginning of round marker, off and just set it aside for a moment. And then you're going to slip purlwise those 2 stitches that you knit at the beginning of round 4. Then you're going to pass the slip stitch over. So this can be a little tricky just because you can't pull on your working yarn to cinch those down. So just be careful you don't knock either one of them off when you pass that slip stitch over. Then put those both back on the left needle. So you have at this point your yarn over on the right side, just kind of hanging out here. And then you have the 2 wrap stitches on your left needle. Then you're going to knit the first of those and then replace your stitch marker. So at this point, you're replacing it at your beginning of round 1. And then from here, you're just going to knit around again. And I would recommend just kind of quickly going through, making sure you have those sets with each one of them having the collar. Yarn over and then 2 stitches with the collar all the way around. And then once you've ensured that you've got that, and you don't need to mark any of them so that you pass the slip stitch over when you get to it as you're knitting the round, then you can just go back and start round 1 again. So rounds 1 and 3, you're just knitting around. It's just a rest round. You're knitting every stitch. And then rounds 2 and 4, you're working the stitch pattern. Round 2, you begin right at the beginning. Jump in without yarn over at the very first stitch, and then you work the stitch pattern to the end of the round. And round 4, you begin with the 2 knit stitches, and then you do this little thing at the end where you're kind of working that stitch pattern, but you're also shifting the beginning of round over 1 stitch. That's it for clue 2. If there's something I didn't show you, something you want to see more up close, something that I didn't do slowly enough, or that you just would like to be made more clear, just ask. I'm happy to do it. Just let me know. Thanks. See you for clue 3.